Okay, so I sat down a few days ago with the intention of watching the PlayStation meeting 2016 and, was hoping that we would get something significant and something interesting, though I had a fair idea of what we would probably get. And as it transpired, we got pretty much what I was expecting. There was a lot of leaks before the event itself, and we kind of knew what was coming, didn't we? We knew we were going to get a PS4 Slim, and we knew we were going to get a PS4 Pro, although we were thinking it was going to be called the Neo, or latterly even PS4 Forever, which was a horrible name, so I'm glad we didn't get that. PS4 Pro is okay. And most of the meeting focused on the PS4 Pro, as you would expect. And Andrew House came on and he waffled on a bit, and he told us about the PS4 Slim and that it was going to be released on September the 15th, I think it was, for $299. I think that was in dollars. And then he told us how the highly discriminating gamer wants tech advances and they want them in this generation. And my response to that was, really? Do we? Because most of the gamers I know didn't really want this. I'm going to do a video about why I think it's a requirement for Microsoft and Sony to be doing these refreshes, but I don't think it was something that gamers were asking for. I think maybe the industry requires it on some level, but yeah, it's not something we were asking for and certainly not something we wanted. So the smoke and mirrors started right there, with Sony telling us exactly what we want. Oh, I don't really like to be told what I want. I like to make my own mind up, thank you very much. And then he proceeded to tell us that, and I quote, with PlayStation 4, we're pretty much maxing out what 1080 TVs can do with most games. Well, again, that's bloody nonsense. Quite a few of PS4 games have come out and they've been lower than 1080p. And many of those that have come out that have been 1080p have struggled to get anything above 30 frames per second. And okay, the Xbox One has got that problem as well. And in fact, it's even worse with the Xbox One. But you can't tell us that the PlayStation 4 is maxing out what 1080p's can do, because it's simply not the case. So they didn't start this conference particularly auspiciously, in my view, because they'd already pissed me off before they even got going. But anyway, I sat there and I thought, well, okay, they haven't started particularly well, but maybe things will get better. And so Andrew House said, at launch, the PS4 Pro will become the #1 provider of high-resolution and HDR content. And to be fair, that sounded pretty reasonable until later on when we got into a bit more of the nitty-gritty, and I will go into more detail on that later. But what I learned later on was that the PS4 Pro, despite the fact that Sony are one of the major players with 4K Blu-ray, the PS4 Pro is not going to have a 4K Blu-ray player. So in many respects, it's already not the #1 provider of high-resolution HDR content, because we've already got 4K Blu-ray players and the Xbox One S, which does have a 4K Blu-ray player built in. So right from the off, they're already behind the curve as far as I can tell. But anyway, let's move on. Andrew House then introduced Mark Cerny, and Cerny talked about 4K in a vague sort of way and talked about some of the other specs, like the fact that the PS4 Pro was going to have a 1 terabyte hard drive. Woohoo! 1 terabyte. Okay, I can see why it's going to be 1 terabyte, because they want to keep the costs down, but come on, really? On the one hand, they're talking about this going to be the most powerful provider of 4K content, and then they're only providing a 1 terabyte hard drive, which most of us with PS4s, or at least many of us, have already upgraded our hard drive to well beyond 1 terabyte. I've actually got a 4 terabyte in my PlayStation 4, so 1 terabyte isn't really going to cut it, is it? Certainly not if they're intending to be providing 4K or giving us games that can do 4K. because with this forwards compatibility, or whatever it was they were touting about, games that already exist on the PS4 being updated to be able to do 4K, and again, that's in inverted commas, these patches are going to be pretty large, I would imagine, just to be able to handle that. And I will get to the 4K gaming aspects of the console in a moment. But needless to say, I didn't think that a 1 terabyte hard drive was anything that they should be shouting about, quite frankly. But at least they were upfront about that one. Cerny then went on to say, the result of all these improvements is a console that provides unparalleled experiences for the 4K TV owner. Well, as I say, that's already debatable, but it gets worse. The PlayStation Pro is going to have a 4.2 teraflop GPU. Now, that's pretty good compared to the PS4 standard, and even better compared to the Xbox One and the Xbox One S. But there's a problem. Or in fact, there are two problems. The first problem is that a 4.2 teraflop GPU simply isn't going to do native 4K. It just won't. Let me explain a little bit about why I think that's the case. When the Xbox One Scorpio was announced back at E3, I was very happy, and the fact that it had a 6 teraflop GPU made me think that, hey, this could be something quite powerful. But, thinking about it and talking around it with friends and family and other gamers, the consensus seemed to be that 6 teraflops wasn't really enough to provide 4K, or at least not 4K at anything over about 30 frames per second. And so we were thinking that, there's going to be compromises with the Xbox One Scorpio. Fast forward to now, and we're looking at the PS4 Pro, and we know that it's got a 4.2 teraflop GPU. Now, okay, teraflops aren't the be-all and end-all, and if you talk to PC gamers, they'll go into great detail about this. But you simply can't get a quart out of a pint pot. Of course, Cerny tried to convince us that you can with this quote. He said, brute force rendering techniques can, of course, be used to support these displays, but they have an unfortunate consequence for console cost and form factor. So, with the PS4 Pro, our strategy has instead been to foster streamlined rendering techniques that can take advantage of custom hardware. When coupled with best-of-breed temporal and spatial anti-aliasing algorithms, the results can be astonishing. Okay, but are these astonishing results native 4K at 60 frames per second? Are they? Are they? No? Yes? Because I'm not convinced. I really don't think that this console is going to do 4K. Well, at least not native 4K. My TV can already upscale to 4K, so why do I need the PS4 to do it? The reality is that we are not going to get native 4K at 60 frames per second out of this console. And we're not going to get native 4K at 30 frames per second out of this console. Not for most games anyway. You might get the odd one or two here and there that doesn't have a lot going on the screen. But no, it's just not going to happen. I will state now that if this console does native 4K at 60 frames per second, I will eat my hat on YouTube. It's just not going to happen. Not unless Mark Cerny and his team have spent the last year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. But Cerny wasn't done there either. He went on to talk about HDR, telling us that it's the most exciting advance in TV tech in the last decade. Well, it's an exciting advance in TV tech, but I'm not sure it is the most exciting advance in TV tech in the last decade. It will improve things if you've got a decent TV that can handle it, and with 4K into the mix as well, it'll make things look stunning, assuming the tech can handle it and assuming the engineering's good and all the rest of it. As with any of these things, it's not just a case of 4K or HDR or 30 frames per second or whatever. There's all sorts of other variables that come into the mix. And one of those variables where HDR is concerned is the fact that we're actually in the middle of a format war. we've got two competing versions of HDR. You've got HDR10 and you've got Dolby Vision. Now, Cerny touched on the fact that the format is in flux, or the standards are in flux. But he didn't actually go into any detail, and again, didn't go into any detail. And the reality is that some people are going to be going out there and buying a 4K television that's got HDR, and they're going to plug in their nice new shiny console, be it the Xbox One S or the PS4 Pro, and they're going to be sadly disappointed because they're going to find the HDR isn't going to work for them because the telly they bought is in Dolby Vision. Because the Xbox One S and the PlayStation 4 Pro are going to be in HDR10, which is the format that Sony supports. And fortunately, there is one bit of good news in that the Xbox One and the PlayStation both support the same format. So at least you're not going to have different TVs for each console, which would really make things awkward. But I know that PS4 Pro is going to support HDR10, but at no point did Sony actually bother to tell us that during the meeting. And yeah, so we were left up in the air again. I wasn't overly impressed, and I think that there were more questions than answers at the end of this meeting, some of which I have subsequently answered for myself and hopefully partially answered for you here. But there's one other little thing that I want to leave you with, and that's looks. You know, we look at the new Xbox One S, and that's improved. I think it looks a lot better than the original Xbox. But I look at the new PS4 Pro and the PS4 Slim, and do they look better than the original PS4? I'm not sure that they do. To be honest, I think that the new PS4s looked like a warthog shagged an oversized Lego brick and gave rise to some, well, deformed monolith. Something out of an Arthur C. Clarke novel or something. Yeah, it's not particularly great looking. And I think this goes to a problem I have with Sony at the moment. I think that they're way ahead in the race, and I don't think they're really making much of an effort. You look at Xbox and their controllers and their new console and the new Gears of War themed console that's coming out, and the original Xbox One S that came out recently, and they're actually pretty nice looking bits of kit. And I think that the new PS4s aren't really. I mean, you know, that the aesthetics is very personal, and it's all a matter of personal taste, isn't it? But yeah, I don't think that they're particularly great looking, and I don't think that Sony have really pulled out the bells and whistles to inspire us, either with the specs or with the way the bloody things look. So I'm left kind of thinking, nah. Would I buy one of these? Should I buy one of these, more importantly? Is it actually worth it to get the upgraded capabilities? Well, in my case, maybe it is, because I have pre-ordered a PlayStation VR headset, the PSVR. And the added grunt should, and I say that again because, again, we don't really know, but it should improve the PSVR. And I actually have a suspicion that the new version of the PS4, the Pro, has been released almost entirely because of PSVR. But, you know, we don't really know. Again, we don't know. How much of this stuff don't we know, really? So, yeah, I feel that Sony are being fast and loose, really, and they're returning to their old ways of not really giving a crap about the gamer or the consumer, as people like to call us these days. But what do you think? Do you agree with me regarding the specs? Do you think I'm talking nonsense when I say I think the things look pretty ugly? Or, you know, have you got a completely different take? As is usually the case, give us a thumbs up if you like this, or give us a thumbs down if you don't. Come into the comments and let's have a chat, because I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. Anyway, that's me done. A bit of a long one, but I wanted to get this one off my chest. I will speak to you guys again soon. Bye.